Hi, friends. If you're a fan of physical culture and also badass women in history, you are going to love today's episode. Welcome back to Bend and Snatch. I'm Penny. This is episode 20. Now, I wanted to talk about another old time strong woman, a queen of the silver era, Abbye Stockton, also known as Pudgy Stockton, queen of Muscle Beach. Now, if you're really into these episodes about old, strong women, I've done another one where I cover 3 other badass strong women from the Bronze Era. So, back to Abbye. Her dad gave her the nickname Pudgy when she was a young child, and it stuck with her whole entire life, despite being anything but pudgy. Now, she was actually really small. She weighed a tiny 115 pounds or 52 kilos in European, and she was just 5'2", which is my height, or 157 centimeters. So she was very short, but also really lean. Abbye was born in August 1917 and she died with Alzheimer's in June 2006, which wasn't really that long ago. She made it to the grand old age of 88. Now, Abbye and her husband, Les Stockton, they were frequent visitors to Muscle Beach in California, and this was where they primarily trained things like acrobatics and gymnastics. And it really blew my mind that Muscle Beach has been around for like 100 years. So obviously I had to go and look it up. I wanted to know if it was the same Muscle Beach, if it was 100 years. And it turns out it was established in 1934, so not quite 100 years, but it's also not actually the same one. It was like down the road and then they rebuilt. So she was at the first one. And then they built what we know as Muscle Beach now a bit further away. I think there might actually be 2 Muscle Beaches. I don't know. I've not been to California. If any American listeners have been to either of these Muscle Beaches and want to tell me more about them, please do. Because I'm just guessing based on the interwebs, you know. Anyways, so they started training together, mostly because Abbye had gained weight working as a telephone operator and Les thought exercise would help. And it did. Not only did she lose the weight, she also became one of the strongest women in America at the time. They started training on the beach every weekend. They were quite the power couple. And one of Abbye's most famous feats involved her lifting her hubby, who weighed about 82 kilos, over her head. Hand-to-hand snap. She could also hold him overhead with just one hand. Now, luckily, we have quite a few photos of her lifting her husband and generally lifting and being a badass. So I'm going to share them on the screen if you're watching rather than just listening. And this is all mostly thanks to her becoming such a huge star. And it's no surprise that she was a quick fan favorite, really. She was featured in tons of magazines and newsreels at the time. And from 1944 to 1955, Abbye even wrote her own regular column on women's training. It was called Barbells. And it featured in the most influential fitness magazine in the world at the time, Strength and Health. Now, she wanted to make lifting weights more appealing to women. So she would explain the benefits of lifting on the female form specifically, and a lot of the messaging from the column was about how lifting weights and exercise is good for your health and it makes you a better athlete. And she was instrumental in changing perceptions around women lifting weights. And that's just so cool. Now, clearly, this is still an ongoing process. Today, more women than ever are participating in strength training and in sports, but it is still a hard sell on the whole. And in her pursuit of getting more women lifting, Abbye actually opened the country's, so the USA's, first ever women's only gym. It was called the Salon of Figure Development, and it had floral wallpaper interior that looked more like a living room than a gym. She wanted to make it feel inviting and cozy and not scary, so that women would come and they would lift and they would learn to be strong. And she wasn't the only woman to wow crowds on Muscle Beach at the time. So there was Relna Brewer, who could single-handedly toss brawny men. And there was April Atkins, who could lift 3 fellow weightlifters at the same time. And then there was also Beverly Josher, who could support 270 kilos worth of acrobats on her little tiny 50-kilo frame. There were some really strong women out there, but nobody caught America's minds and attention the way that Abbye did, who was, by her own accounts, pictured more than 4 dozen times, maybe, in magazine covers, maybe around 4 dozen. And she wouldn't let the press downplay her femininity, and this was probably part of why she became so popular. So she would pose not just lifting weights, but also sewing and washing dishes in her Santa Monica home. And look, my first reaction when I read that was like, oh, what the fuck? Maybe like a bit mildly offended on behalf of women everywhere. That washing dishes is the feminine thing. And look, I really had to sit with that and mull it over. And it was, 80 years ago or whatever. And if you're a woman doing something that women aren't supposed to do, like lifting weights, fighting to prove that you're still a woman, I guess makes sense. But it's kind of sad, isn't it? That things don't really change. That this strong, beautiful woman who was celebrated for being so strong and cool was only really able to get the fame that she got by playing along with the patriarchy's silly games. Having to wear the cute fits, washing the dishes, being all girly, and the strong women who didn't play this game didn't get as much fame or fortune, even if they were stronger than her and doing some cooler feats of strength. But also, like, maybe she just really loved being girly and really loved sewing and washing dishes, and I can get behind loving sewing. But come on, who loves washing the dishes? Honestly, does anyone love washing the dishes? Surely that's the worst of the tasks. And sewing and dishwashing being what makes a woman, I guess that's the bit that ruffles my feathers, right? Because, like, I don't know. I'm not upset that she personally wanted to present herself femininely and alongside, like, present her femininity alongside her strength, and that she wanted to wear the cute outfits and she wanted everyone to know that she still liked sewing and washing the dishes. Because, like, women should be able to do whatever they want. Love that for her. Cool. Whatever you want to do, you should be allowed to do it and present however you want to present and explore gender and life and sport and whatever else in whatever way brings you joy and meaning. But at the end of the day, even after all these years, it is still what it's like for women today. You can be really awesome at something. You can be the top of your game. You could be winning medals. But if you're not willing to play the game and still be nice to look at and polite and girly, then you're faced with obstacle after obstacle to prove your worth. And I think that is a fight that female athletes are still battling all these years later. And yeah, there's more visibility, there's more participation, more everyday women are like, yeah, let's go to the gym, let's lift stuff, let's build some muscle, and that's awesome. But it's always against this constant battle of society being like, that's manly though, innit? Not really womanly enough. And then that's obviously coupled with the climate that we're in, where everyone is like transvestigating. I've gone off kilter a little bit, so let me pull it back on in. So speaking to Sports Illustrated Women in 2002, Abbye said, in those days, lifting weights was considered unfeminine. People used to say that if women worked out, they would become masculine looking or wouldn't be able to get pregnant. We just laughed because we knew that they were wrong. And I love that. We still know that they're wrong. But people do still just say such silly things, don't they? With their silly little ideas of what makes a woman. But maybe I just need to laugh at the misogynists a bit more. Maybe that's the secret to some joy. Just laughing at their nonsense. And we see it with the warnings of getting too bulky now, right? And scrawny men lamenting whenever a woman on the internet can lift more than him that she'll never find a husband, or calling her a man or whatever. And this has obviously intensified in the last few years with the rise in the anti-trans rhetoric and the more transvestigating, like I said earlier, that goes on. The more women are policed for their muscles and their hair and their attitude and their success. And I think that's a big part of why I love learning about strong, powerful women like Abbye. And like so many awesome women, defying expectations today to be awesome at whatever they're awesome at, and shutting down those fragile little men that try to cut them down. And it's just a beautiful thing. So in 1947, Abbye helped organise the first amateur athletic union sanctioned weightlifting competition for women. And she, in this competition, pressed 45 kilos, snatched 48 kilos, and clean and jerked 61 kilos. Now, remember, she weighed 52 kilos, and she would have been lifting on a men's bar as well. Super impressive, especially for the time. Now, do you want to know how that compares with today? So as of last year, British weightlifting recorded the best snatch for a 53 kilo woman at 87 kilos. So I'm using 53 kilo because that's the weight class rather than 52. Anyway, so best snatch for a 53 kilo woman, 87 kilos. Best clean and jerk, 106 kilos. And it's a real testament to how far the sport has come over the last 70 years, that women have kept lifting, kept training, kept building those numbers up to such big numbers. I love it. So in the early 2000s, there were less than 10% of women engaging in regular strength training. And then in 2020, that figure went up to 24% of women in England. Anyways, so what's interesting is a lot of independent gym spaces, women are actually taking up the majority of space. Like, I'm pretty sure at Sheffield Weightlifting Club, there are more women than there are men. And I think it might be the same at Braze, but I don't spend enough time with the members there to know for sure. So it's definitely still growing, strength sports and sport in general for women. And I am so here for it, because strength is one of the predictors for a long, healthy life. Like, the more strong you are and the more muscle mass you have, the longer you're going to live probably, and also the more independent a life you're probably going to have. And I actually just saw a study the other day that measured strength and power in almost 4,000 individuals between the ages of 45 and 75. And then they followed them for 10 years just to see who would die first. And they found that the subjects with the lowest strength had a 1.6 to 1.7 times higher rate of death. That's a pretty big deal. So they measured strength with like a grip test. They had to like squeeze something. But those with the lowest power, they had a 6 to 7 times higher rate of death. That's fucking massive. So they measured power with like this pull test where you like pull this way, right? So 6 to 7 times higher rate of death. That's mind-blowing, right? And strength training, including power training specifically, is literally making your life better and potentially longer. And it's an excellent thing that more people are doing it. Anyway, I got a bit sidetracked again. So let's go back to Abbye. In 1953, Abbye put her bodybuilding career on hold to have a daughter, and then she returned to the gym world 7 years later in 1960. There she worked in West Los Angeles women's gym for the next 20 years, and she was one of the few women of physical culture at the time lifting and working and bringing weights to like regular women. There were loads of other women lifting at the time, but mostly they were professional, strong women working in like circuses or sideshows, not just like chilling on a beach with the lads and writing columns in popular fitness magazines. And she was popular. She had a profound effect on the women of the time. So her 1940s fame coincided with America going to war and women taking positions on the workforce, often for the first time. And I imagine a lot of the fame that she got for being strong was probably quite galvanizing for a lot of women at the time who were able to see that doing physical work wouldn't mean losing their femininity. And I think that same message is why modern sports stars like Alona Mar are so popular. It's that strength and power and athleticism on the rugby field, whilst also still always rocking her trademark red lipstick. Because ultimately, gender stereotypes make no sense, and someone can be whatever they want to be. And if a woman wants to lift weights and also wear dresses, she can do whatever she wants. And it doesn't take anything from her femininity or make her any less of a woman. But also, if a woman wants to lift weights and wear suits, that doesn't take anything from her femininity either. Because it just all is presentation, right? And you can just be whatever you want to be. And if society didn't gender hobbies and professions quite so much, I really do think everyone would be a lot happier, because people like what they like, and it doesn't have to mean losing their femininity or like losing their masculinity or whatever. And maybe if everybody stopped ascribing gender to arbitrary things, people wouldn't drown themselves trying desperately to fit into these little tiny boxes that make them so sad that they then spend their whole lives trying to make everybody else's life miserable because they should stay in these tiny little miserable boxes too. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in, friends. And if you would like to learn more about some old school strong women, let me know in the comments, and I would be happy to make more episodes covering women that we should all really know about. Be sure to follow, subscribe, wherever you get your podcasts, and share the episode with anyone you think might like them. It really makes a huge difference. And, you know, I'm a little podcast, I'm a little content creator. I'm not making tons of content because really job number one is being a coach. So if you can help spread the word and share the content around, that would really be wonderful. You're the best. Anyways, until next time.